Thank you, Dr. Morrow. Our next presenter is Dr. David Van Stralen of the Loma Linda University School of Medicine. Dr. Van Stralen.
Thank you again very much for this opportunity. I have the slides. How do we get the slides on? Oh, they're working on it. Okay. Well, I'm going to be talking about the implementation in healthcare. The title of the talk, that's what they taught you. Let me tell you what really happens, came about when I first began working in the intensive care unit. And I realized that no matter how much education I gave somebody, I could be lost in a second when somebody pulled someone aside and said, let's tell you how it really works. So my focus became one of how can I teach them what works. I had a rule that what I taught today has to explain yesterday or be used tomorrow, and I limited it to that material. Now, creating safety culture from the streets to the hospital, today being 9/11, it's important to me to remind those I work with, we do have the heroics of the public safety people, the military people, but I don't want to lose the heroics of civilians who used their everyday behaviors and beliefs in a heroic manner. And sometimes I wonder how an organization is able to suppress that so they don't use it for everyday life. Another goal I have in working with people is that they have life experience and experience at the point of work, but they can't express it to me. So how do I get that information out of them? Error in medicine, contributing to safety, there's a lot of research about it. They've looked at safety culture, high reliability organizations. They've discussed culture. We've identified the problem area. There's a long list of never events that should never happen, but they happen anyway. We have internal solutions. They're more targeted. Evidence-based medicine, we want to have the proof that it works, best practices. And we also have external solutions where we've looked at aviation, the military, and nuclear power. Probably the most influential is the entertainment industry. One of my students hearing my lecture spent a whole year trying to identify what movies his people worked with so he could predict their behaviors, and he found it was very effective. And I have to deal with that routinely, particularly during an emergency setting. You'll see movie behaviors coming out when you least expect it. So overall in healthcare and safety culture, you're going to find that we've had some gains in certain areas, but in the last 12, 15 years, we do not have safety culture. There's been no change in culture, and we've expanded the definition of patient safety, but that's about as far as we've gone from my ideas. And this is not just me talking. This is what I've read in the literature and talked to the executive level of the various safety organizations and healthcare organizations. What happened to culture? Well, I'm going to go back to when I was working with this years ago to define it as a social response to the environment. It's the social knowledge passed down from elder to novice. And unfortunately, the novices commonly will learn from somebody closest to them in ignorance. So how can I change this so that the elders offer their information? And that's my goal. In behaviors, one of the things, we talk about direct effects, and that's what people want from me, quid pro quo. If my people do this, what will I get? But to change culture, you have the indirect effects. And there's one person I overheard said that what Dr. Van Stralen teaches you, you may not use immediately, but one day in an emergency, it'll come to you. So I look for the indirect effects of the behaviors I'm looking for. Beliefs that are imposed because I gave a list and here's what you're going to believe and what we all believe as an organization. They have resistance and resentment. I'm looking for an internalized passion. I build upon within them what they have and bring that out. And then the structure commonly is designed. We have the organizational charts, we have diagrams, and you've seen all the patterns that are out there. But to me, the culture is self-organized as an emergent. It's a response to the environment. So one of the first things I did in the intensive care unit was I reframed the environment for people. I wanted to remove that sense of fear so that they could see the environment as I saw it, so they could think clearly. But again, in all the safety culture material I read, environment is completely left out of the question. So what are we safe from? That's also not asked. And originally looking at it from what I've seen is this accident rates that come from engineering fields. Accidents are very clearly demarcated because there's a lack of control of energy. And as a result of that, we can have a deterministic approach. Now I'm in medicine applying that. That's difficult because I have biology, which I don't always understand inside the patient. I've got uncontrolled physiology, and I've got uncontrolled behavior of the patient, bystanders, and my team. The accidents may not be an accident. One case I had early on, physician cardiac catheterization led to septic shock and death of the child, and one of the lead physicians in the institution almost orchestrated a campaign that this physician was a bad physician. On autopsy, we found out the child had no spleen, and an incidental bacteria turned into infection, and the patient died. So had we not had the autopsy, we would have thought it was bad care. With the autopsy, we realized it was the patient. Not that it's the patient's fault, but it was the patient's physiology. So we have these complex nonlinear interactions between the physiology, pathology, underlying health, behavioral responses, the family, the team, and the family. And this all comes together in this complex way that makes it difficult to say this is the cause. So in patient safety, my experience is it's written by people with limited experience in hazardous environments. They watch it, they'll see it in the movies, they'll see it watch it at a scene of an accident, and then write up some kind of pattern for us to follow. So safety culture to me, is it a culture with low accident rate? Or, most important, is it a culture that works with hazards? Is it a culture that allows you to enter a hazardous environment? And I set my program up based on that. If the environment is the pathology, which I'm responding to, then I have to deal with the emotion, the epistemology, and that includes my knowledge domains of whether it's cognitive or affective. And I'm also looking at reasoning, attitudes, and values, and how do I respond to the anomaly. Now, critical to me is watching people early on is, do they respond to a threat through searching for a structure for authority? The authority tends to be off-site, somebody who knows everything. If they tell me this is okay, then I'm fine with it. Or we have rules, but rules are discrete, they're static, and the self-protection starts coming out, which is either offensive, we blame people, or it's defensive, where I find excuses. What I want to see in people, when I'm encouraging them, is engagement. I want them to lose their distractions and focus, and as Bob B. from UC Berkeley pointed out, it's interactive real-time risk assessment and management. I don't know what's happening, so I'm going to engage. I learn the structure of the problem through engagement. I learn what works through action. I'm always identifying for errors and correcting them. And my self-protection comes through strength, generally intellectual strength or the strength of others. Now, emotion is important because we always think with a thinking person, Homo sapiens, prefrontal cortex, perception goes to thought. I'm really handled this easily. I end up with facts and future thinking, the executive functions of the brain. This is how I like to picture myself. In reality, when I'm dealing with uncertainty or threat, I've got the amygdala. It's a threat response, it's perception to action, and that's how the environment influences my thinking. Now, what does that do? Fight, flight, or freeze. Everybody understands that, but ask them how that's manifested behaviorally. How is it manifested cognitively? And I teach people that when you see anger, you see avoidance, you have confusion or freeze, those are simply chemicals in your brain. When somebody's angry with you, you're not incompetent, they're afraid, and that changes the way you interact with them. The epistemology is important as we convert our belief to knowledge, because I'm dealing in an area that is an N of one. How do I come up with some kind of a belief on, a knowledge system on that? So I focus on anecdote, but how do you use anecdote? We don't teach that. So we fall back on our empirical evidence approach, which does not apply to our situation. Again, deductive, facts guarantee the hypothesis. I feel safe. The more facts I have, the better off I am. And then knowledge, and I want inductive reasoning. And of course, going into knowledge domains, I'm affective domain. Some of the attitudes, I'll go over briefly on these. We have taken Wyke and Sutcliffe's principles and converted them to attitudes. And it's a lot easier sell on people. They understand it, and it's more effective. I have identified some attitudes with Admiral Mercer: duty, honesty, dignity, empathy, and humility. If I can't learn from somebody, if I don't have empathy for them, I don't learn from them. I just say their mistake was stupid, and I'll never learn. So I need to have that empathy. And then the value shifts is critical because I want conformity and obedience during low-tempo times. How do I teach my team to go to creativity and initiative in high-tempo times? And that's lost on most safety culture programs I've seen. So the anomaly can be a random independent event, and I love that because of statistics, probability, I can predict. I got a beautiful curve. I can manipulate the curve with mathematics. But in reality, the anomaly is a covert compensated state, is an early herald of something coming on, and I don't want to wait till it's decompensated state. I want to get it early on before the entrainment and cascading failure. So what happens from safety culture, in my view, it enables operations within a hazardous environment. There's conditions our members to monitor and engage early the heralds of dysfunction. Its complexity of actions in organization will expand in real time. I acknowledge and modulate the threat response within the person. There's a specific epistemology, reasoning, and decision-making, and it's an emergent phenomena that culture comes out of this approach. So the anomaly is not a random independent event we easily disregard. The anomaly is the early herald, is a warning we investigate through engagement. That is what my team to look at, and for me, safety culture emerges from that appoint. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Van Stralen. Our next speaker will be Rear Admiral Thomas Eccles, United States Navy retired. Admiral Eccles.
Okay, thank you very much. And to the chairman and members, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity today to speak with you on the Navy's submarine safety program. I need to say up front that, as has been mentioned a couple of times, I've recently retired, and so the views